So a little while ago, I was contacted by JMac from Armies of Middle-earth and Adam from 3D Games to collaborate on some evil terrain.
Okay, I am going with Mordor terrain because I think Mordor is the evilest of all the places, so that's why I'm doing Mordor. Even going to do a wee diorama for Mr. Sauron, Mount Doom.
Following on from my last video, I'm continuing with the Goblin Town theme. So, for an elite army like Goblin Town, you want to have a solid display for it. So that's kind of what I'm going for. I want a nice. It's not a centerpiece because it's going to be in the corner, but like a really cool backdrop.
Big old display board.
I wanted to make something that was quite rare, something you don't see every day, and explore a kind of different feel and different culture, particularly with evil terrain. It was at this point I remembered my previous collaboration with YouTubers, which was to make some Khandish. I had a blast kit bashing some up, and I wanted to explore that amalgam of different Eastern cultures again. Little is really known about Khand in Tolkien's Legendarium, so it was kind of a blank canvas for me to build on. I'm Joe from Windish Wargamers, and here's how I made some Khandish terrain for Middle-earth strategy battle game. For the basis of this terrain, I chose the Toshi Garden set from the TT Combat Eastern Empire's range. It's a great kit that comes with a large building, lots of small scatter, as well as a water feature pond with a bridge. This gives a very tranquil and peaceful vibe, which is not something you often associate with evil terrain, which was exactly what I was after. This is obviously inspired by the Toshi Gardens of the Japanese medieval culture. MDF is one of those things that's so readily available. The designs can look great, and with certain tricks you can just elevate it to a next level. The MDF was poked out of the frame and was assembled as normal using Gorilla Wood glue. There's something about the smell of MDF kits I really like, as well as the feeling. It's kind of like putting together a Lego set or a jigsaw puzzle. It's just really satisfying. One feature I did want to include to tie it into the Khandish army that myself and my brother made was to use some cherry blossom trees. I had plenty going spare, and after drilling a small hole, they were glued in place. The foliage on the cherry blossom trees looks great naturally, but the twisted wire just doesn't look like a tree trunk. So I used a hot glue gun to ooze out some hot glue to make a more kind of rounded organic shape that was more befitting of a cherry blossom tree. The hot glue was also used to make root systems and make it really firmly connect to the MDF bases. And again, this technique and these trees were used all across the terrain to really tie it together. For the ground coverage, I had some of these sizable rock molds from where I made my stone giant. That's also linked above, check it out. These were glued down to break up the flat MDF, make it look more irregular and make it look more natural by extension. The rest of the ground coverage was these bits of cork for larger stones, and then this Army Painter ground coverage. These are applied with PVA. For things like the building and the pond, they're easy because they kind of have their own base. For the other scatter, I wanted to give them their own MDF bases. Fortunately, I had several going spare. More rocks and trees were glued down to these, as well as whatever these are. I think they might be a kind of shrine. They look cool. I don't know what they are. If anyone knows, please tell me in the comments. I'm not that familiar with Japanese medieval period. Either way, they look cool, and I glued them down with glue. One of my favourite features of the army that we made is my brother's terracotta concept army. These were of course inspired by the terracotta warriors in China. It was a way to separate his kind of ancient Wayne Rider charioteers with my contemporary, very much alive Khandish people. And this was a feature I wanted to bring into the terrain. I wanted to make a procession of horses and warriors that were still submerged, ready to be dug out and reanimated. The spare miniatures were glued in lines, and then a series of cork was built up on the edges to give the appearance of partial excavation. Once that was finished and there was cling film on the foliage of the cherry blossom trees, everything was sprayed black and had the chocolatey brown from above. These were both applied with a rattle can. This was quick and easy. Anything that I didn't want to look wooden was masking taped over, and the wood was sprayed from above using first a limestone and then a full white. Sponging was used to sponge up to a near white on the bridge. This gave the impression that the bridge was well worn. The building was also sprayed black and then brown. I used this image as inspiration, as the bright blue roof, the kind of brown timber, and the white sections in between the roof tiles were sprayed green. The green was meant to match the green used by my Khandish footmen. The parts of the roof that would be the tile grout was painted using a sandy colour. Some parts were masking taped off to preserve the chocolatey brown underneath, and they were sprayed limestone. For any areas that would be walked upon, I wanted to make it look like the bridge, but for whatever reason it just didn't work as well. Maybe I was too quick with the sponging and the layers of paint hadn't dried properly. Either way, it just didn't look great. So I elected to go over this using a sepia contrast paint. I think this was snakebite leather, and that gave a really nice kind of walnut varnished wood effect. So far so good with the house, but I needed to do two things. One, bring it back into Middle Earth, and two, fully marry it up with the paint scheme for Khand. Now I've got the jade green, I've got the white. What I needed now was the pink. Pink Eyes of Sauron were adorned onto the side, as well as painted onto some of the doors, which do slide by the way, so it can be used in gameplay. I did do some sponging to create some variation on the roof, but ultimately I didn't think it looked great, so I ended up coming back with a flat colour, and I do think it looks a lot smarter this way. I did originally want some kind of green murky water, but I went about it the complete wrong way. I painted the shore a kind of sandy colour, and then gradually worked my way into a kind of murky green, to create depth. I figured, hey, it's only about 2mm, I'll just use some clear PVA as my water effect. I tinted with some dirty down moss, and that's probably another reason why it went wrong. I poured it on, but it was taking an absolute age to dry, and I figured I don't even like how this looks now. I'm not going to like how it will look when it's dry. I don't like the colour, it doesn't work. I'm going to mop it up with some tissue paper and start again. Referencing those images again, I decided to shoot for more of a dark blue colour. I could see instantaneously this was going to look a lot nicer. I sprinkled some of the leaf foliage into the water to give the impression of fallen leaves. Small bits of lichen were also used under the bridge. This was to set it apart to look almost like the kind of algae that grows, if you like. This was only used in the water features. When that was dry, I decided to add the water effects. I didn't go back to the PVA glue because that looked naff, so I decided to use this Aqua Magic. This is a great product. I've used it with the nozzle for ripple effects, but this time I took the lid off and poured it on. This was then pushed around with a brush, and then when it dried, I used some more of the Aqua Magic from the nozzle to create some kind of water ripple. The finish is great, it's really glossy, looks like water, I'm really pleased with it. For the painting of the Terracotta Warriors, I used pigment powders. This gives a very dry, dusty appearance, just like the Terracotta Warriors in real life. And just like them, I wanted to emulate that look. I used this kind of rusty red colour for the terracotta, and then used a kind of mid-grey that really aged it and made it look like it had been buried for a long time. Very similar to this reference photo. Looking at source images, there's plenty of moss carpeted around, and I wanted that to be a large feature tying the terrain pieces together. I used two products for this. I used Dirty Down Moss Effect for that kind of streaking green that you get in places where there's lots of moisture, and I used some AK Interactive Moss Texture. This stuff is dynamite, it's so good. It makes everything look amazing. I put it on my trolls, linked above. I put it on loads of terrain, just looks brilliant. With the ground fully painted, I wanted to move on to some flock coverage. This was a good opportunity to diversify the kind of cultures that I'm borrowing for this terrain project. I wanted to emulate the steppes of Asia and Europe. For this, I use 3 flock colours, mostly using this kind of yellow, dry grassland from AK Interactive. I did use a dark green, which I think is from Army Painter, and a touch of light green every now and again, just to make it not look fully dead. But primarily it is this yellow colour. I don't have a static grass applicator, so I decided to lay this down with some thin PVA glue, and using the static electricity from rubbing a balloon on a jumper, I'm not joking, this is what I did, I managed to make some of the grass stand on end look a little bit more natural. On the whole, I quite like the effect. The last final touches on all of the terrain was to add some tufts and some more leaf foliage. And with that, the terrain is done. I've made quite a few terrain sets for Middle-earth now. I probably have enough to run a small tournament, and this is probably one of my favourites, honestly. It's the terrain set I never knew I needed to make until now. It was actually a really fun process to make this. I love the colours and how they work with each other. Let me know what you think of it in the comments below. It's really good to play on. I've had a couple of games on it already. Make sure you check out the videos of the other lads if you haven't already. They've done some really amazing work. Give this video a like if you liked it, or a dislike if you didn't like it. Please subscribe if you haven't. There's loads and loads of Middle-earth content. There's loads and loads of wargaming content. Check out the Discord link. There's loads of really great hobbyists in there sharing their work and inspiring each other. I've been Joe from Windish Wargamers. Thanks again for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.
Yeah, good. Do you wanna talk to us about your terrain, John? Just get the ball rolling.
No, I don't. Fuck off. Right.
This is why collaborations don't work.